concern I would have about some of the repurposing, as far as we know so far, of much of your oratory and online work, seems to me that it supports the powerful. It supports hegemony. I don't agree that things are as simple as white men are in a position of power, but I'm only interested in who is able to affect change, who is able to influence, who can you not attack in public, what is possible, who is being controlled. That's what interests me. Okay. So, transnational corporations, economic elites, and how are they served by what I say or by what you say?
Okay, so that's a reference back to the existence of inequality. We agreed earlier
that inequality back
is
to
a big
that
problem. Oh, yeah,
but you're saying it's natural, which clearly...
Well, it's not. You cannot lay it at the feet of capitalism. That's absolutely clear. And the fact that it's natural...
It ain't bloody helping, though,
capitalism. Make it desirable. What's that?
Capitalism doesn't help. There's so many, Marxist critique, what I understand about it, is that capitalism is built on limitless growth from finite resources, and also capitalism will always be redirected and criminally misused, and the sort of the economics of our time, it sort of, for me, is demonstrable. I know sort of there are people that say, oh no, people are richer now than ever, but staying in LA for a while and there's 90,000 homeless people in the greater LA area, it seems like some sort of the apocalypse is creeping in.
People are richer than they ever have been, but the extremes of inequality are high too. And there's some evidence. Well, here's an example of how these things might work. So imagine that people are getting richer. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But here's
we got more stuff, even though I'm sure you would agree that
starving. That's one.
Not starving. That's good.
Like obesity is a bigger problem in the world now than
starvation.
Right. That's a big deal. That's a big plus. But
in a way, it implies that people are being underserved by their operating systems.
But there's no doubt about that.
And it still infers inequality also.
Oh yes. Well, first of all, there's no doubt that any social system has a tyrannical and arbitrary aspect. I mean, that's an archetypal trait. Any, of course. And even well-functioning systems have a tyrannical aspect. Not mostly, or at least merely, because they require conformity.
Native Americans who you're down with, not Native Americans, Native Canadians. Yeah. The qua.
Yeah.
Like them guys. How's their social system set up?
Oh, it's a catastrophe.
Go on.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a catastrophe for all sorts of reasons. I mean,
some of it...
Yeah, it is. It's the situation is very catastrophic. It's partly because, the reserve system was set up in Canada, and it had a possibility of working when there was a possibility that small communities could work economically. But small communities don't work economically anymore. Like if you go through Saskatchewan, for example, a central province in Canada, in the 1960s, there were thousands and thousands of small towns. Mostly Caucasian.
That is because
they're done.
That's capitalism, though. Huh?
No, it's not. It's deeper than that. It's the same problem. Well,
it might be deeper than it, but in its current form, it is capitalism. Because I would agree that what is capitalism a manifestation of? Greed. You could say.
It's the same thing but the same thing has happened all over the world. Like urbanization is taking place at a tremendously rapid rate. It doesn't matter what the culture is or the form of government.
So you think that the politics is happening at a lower level? The phenomenology that's that's significant is a bigger tide, and within it, political systems are just flowing about. But that doesn't mean we should dismantle the ones we have in search of fairer, more just, better ones, particularly if they're empirically not working.
If we could come up with a way to reliably flatten inequality, that would be a good thing. But the empirical evidence suggests, so there's a bunch of things. It suggests, first of all, if you look at the attempts to alleviate inequality over the last 200 years, whether there were left-wing governments in power or right-wing governments in power made absolutely no difference whatsoever to the degree of inequality. The only things that have been reliably demonstrated to flatten out inequality are catastrophes. Wars, revolutions, epidemics. There's one other. War, revolution, epidemics. Well,
it's going to be some kind of horseman.
Now, that's right. It's another horseman. I can't remember which it is. But the price of radical redistribution seems to be tremendous death. Yeah, and no one has come up with.
Do you think that's because of how power functions? Because, in an unequal system, whilst there are many people that are suffering, there are some people that are benefiting. I'm in a tier that benefits from the current economic situation. I drive a nice car. I have a nice house. I go where I want.
Well, let's look at that for a minute. if you think about how that happened in your life, I bet I can tell you how it happened.
Go on.
Well, I mean, this isn't a personal account, but
Well, it better be.
You had success.
Otherwise, I'm not
you had
interested.
success in one dimension, right? High success. But because you were successful in that dimension, all sorts of opportunities came your way. Like, my suspicions are that where you're sitting now, you have more opportunities than you can deal with. Is that correct?
Yeah,
right.
There are opportunities.
Right, exactly. Well, see, this is part of what seems to drive inequality, is that as you get successful, the opportunities that come your way start to multiply, and they don't multiply linearly, they multiply exponentially. And so when you start moving up faster and faster and faster and faster. And then you'll hit a point where you have so many opportunities that you don't even know what to do with them. And so it's a nonlinear improvement. But the downside of that is, and you might have had periods in your life that were like this too, where let's say you start to get depressed, and then you start to drink because you're depressed. And then you start to isolate yourself because you're drinking and you're depressed. And because you're drunk and depressed, then your friends start to abandon you. And then you lose your job. It's like you're not going downhill in a straight line. You're going downhill faster and faster and faster till you fall off a cliff. And that seems to be how the world works. It's like there's a center point. It's unstable. Things improve, then they improve exponentially. And things fall, and then they fall off exponentially. And that seems to be what's driving inequality. You start to succeed, and the probability that you'll continue to succeed starts to expand. And we don't know how to control that. And well, here's some other examples of it, though, because I said you couldn't lay it at the feet of capitalism. The same thing happens to cities. A small proportion of the cities get all the people. So some cities grow like mad, and others fail catastrophically, like Detroit. It applies to the mass of stars. So there's a very few stars in the Milky Way that have most of the matter. So it applies to the height of trees in the jungle.
Right. And you think if things are applicable in cosmology and in biology, the way that they are, their application politically and sociologically becomes less relevant because you see these phenomena as being broader than meliorism. I don't think it's less relevant.
I don't think the left-wingers are pessimistic enough about the problem. They say inequality is a problem. Inequality is a problem. Like it's a terrible problem. But then they say, well, it's probably a function of our political and economic systems, and we could fix those. It's like, no, it's not a function of our political and economic systems. Or if it is, it's at such a deep level that we don't know what drives it, and we certainly don't know how to control it.
But does that not mean, Jordan, that would you then reject any attempt to alter systems in favour of fairness? Because it seems to me that the focus is on, and as it would be for a clinical psychologist, individual change. Now, part of my personal experience is without individual change, social change is sort of irrelevant. And many great gurus would say...
You answered it right then and there. It's like, because I am concerned with inequality, say, and with social instability. And I thought about it for a long time. I knew that the left-wing approaches tended to fail catastrophically. And the right wing, of course, isn't particularly concerned with inequality, so that's irrelevant.
The left wing fails and the right wing don't care.
Yeah, that's right. That's fundamental.
So we need to
They also don't see the danger sufficiently. And the right wing also tends to think that the spoils go to who deserves them. Yeah. And that's kind of true, but it's not completely true. So that's part of that.
No, because we're not all... Because, of course, and what from a leftist perspective would be that we're not starting from a level playing field.
And the system isn't perfect at selecting.
This is why I think a spiritual solution, but something that is beneath or beyond material, is the only way that true progress is likely to be achieved. I was thinking of this, something that you said before about, we were talking briefly about kindness and compassion, and it occurs to me, and this is, I'm sure, very simplistic, but the heroism itself, by which I mean sacrifice, the willingness to sacrifice yourself for a greater idea. What excites me about that idea, and I believe why the phenomena is so loaded, is if someone is willing to die for something, it's that they believe it's bigger than them, or in fact that their self is not the truest thing, that there is something greater. If I would give my life for another person, it's almost an acknowledgement of oneness, the temporalness of the individuated self. And we all work so hard to to achieve individuation, and I'm sure much of your work as a clinical psychologist is guiding people towards it. But for me, it's just a temporary resting place, because having had the kind of experiences of personal humiliation, annihilation, success, failure, decimation, like, you know, all of these things, that what I've been led to, and what I continue to struggle with, is how do I serve? How am I of service? How do I help people?
I think that is the solution to the problem. It's like, I don't think the solution to the problem of inequality is sociological. I think it's psychological. I mean, partly what I'm trying.
Why? Because it's closer to essence? Because it's more essential? Or because a society has to be a reflection of individual psyches or collective psyches? Why is it psychological?
I think the temptation towards resentment and destruction that's associated with sociological approaches to inequality is too great, and that as a consequence, those movements tend inexorably to become corrupt and destructive. Because I think Orwell put his finger on it when he said that middle-class socialists don't like the poor, they just hate the rich. And that hatred, I think that hatred gets the upper hand in sociological movements. I think that the best approach to ameliorating inequality is to strengthen the individual. I mean, and that's what I've concentrated on doing. Like, we have this program, the self-authoring suite, and